Okay, apologies for it being so dark out, but I'm just talking. You don't need to see me. So, I'm going to talk about capitalism, communism, and socialism. I'm going to talk about the differences between these words. And the reason I say that they're words will come full circle, but in short, some people equate all three of these things as economic models, and I think that kind of muddies the waters a little bit. But I'll get into what I mean by that. So here's the way I see it, right? Capitalism doesn't determine how profits are distributed, okay? Capitalism is just an economic model, okay? And that economic model organizes competition within markets through private ownership, right? Private companies provide certain goods and services, and they are competed with by other private companies providing those same goods and services, right? So we could argue that this competition helps drive improvement in those markets. Now, I'm not sure that the competition is necessary for the improvement, okay? It may speed up the improvement or it may not. The truth is, we may never know. But nothing about the capitalistic model requires that the owners exploit the labor of the working class, okay? And a lot of people like to say that this is inevitable in capitalism, but I'm going to argue differently, okay? So if we take communism in comparison, communism gives the power to distribute the means of production to a centralized authority, right? And this can sound good in theory because it seems like the centralized authority would distribute the profits fairly, okay, more fairly than in a capitalistic economy, and avoid the exploitation of labor, right? But if you assume that absolute power corrupts absolutely, and I believe it does, and we can talk about that if you want to argue that, I'm happy to talk about it, but the point is that if absolute power does corrupt absolutely, then communism will effectively turn into the same thing that capitalism does eventually. Eventually, whether it's the owners exploiting labor or the government exploiting labor, they're going to end up being similar from an economic standpoint, from a wealth inequality standpoint. So before long, the people in power, again, whether the owners in capitalism or the government in communism, they will become corrupt, okay? It seems to me that capitalism and communism are just two different ways for the ruling class to skin the cat that is the working class, right? So I would argue that the problem in the United States today is not actually capitalism per se, nor is the solution communism. Instead, I would say that socialism is the solution, but socialism within a capitalistic economy. Now, this may seem contradictory, but in truth, capitalism and socialism are not mutually exclusive, right? We have socialistic policies in the United States, despite the fact that we are a capitalistic economy. Why is that? How is that possible? Well, again, they're not mutually exclusive, okay? The difference between communism and socialism is very nuanced, and a lot of people like to put them on the same playing field, but that's not the case, okay? So if I define communism again, we could say that communism is an economic model where a democratically elected centralized authority controls and distributes the means of production, okay? This is not unlike the capitalistic republic that the United States is, okay? We democratically elect people, and we hope that they represent our interests, right? And yet, they're not representing our interests, okay? If you ask any working class American, they will probably tell you, whether on the left or right, they'll probably tell you that they're not representing our interests, okay? So, like capitalism, communism is an economic model, but I don't consider socialism to be an economic model, okay? I consider socialism to be a social model that exists with a magnitude in every economy, whether it's a capitalistic economy or communistic economy, okay? So, therefore, we can say that socialism underlies both capitalistic economies and communistic economies. And we can define the magnitude of socialism as the magnitude of class consciousness, okay? Or even the magnitude of collectivism. We can put socialism and equate it to collectivism, or to, uh, again, class consciousness. So class consciousness, again, it has a magnitude. Socialism has a magnitude. If we look at some of those Northern European countries, they have perhaps higher levels of socialist policies, whereas in the United States, we don't even have universal health care. That's a magnitude there, right? Despite the fact that both of those economies are actually capitalistic. So, again, capitalism is just organizing competition within markets between private owners, right? So, in this sense, if class consciousness, or again, the magnitude of socialism, is low, then that means the working class is divided amongst themselves, right? The only reason this happens is due to a high magnitude of success of divide and conquer strategies, okay? This low class consciousness will allow corruption in both capitalistic and communistic economies, and the working class loses in both of those scenarios. So, again, capitalism and communism, they kind of lead to the same result in the absence of class consciousness, high class consciousness, or in the absence of high socialistic policies, a high magnitude of socialism. So, in the capitalistic model, owners exploit the labor due to a lack of organization in the working class by dividing them, right, through manipulation, right? Usually manipulation in the mainstream media. They divide people among any lines they can, religious, social lines, racial lines, right? Anything they can divide the public on, they do that, and then the class consciousness lowers. And in the communistic model, the authorities do the same thing with state-owned media, okay? And again, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. If you give the power to anybody, and in conjunction with low-class consciousness, the absolute power is going to corrupt itself, okay? It's going to enable whoever has the resources, which is either the government or the owners in this case, between communism and capitalism respectively, it's going to enable them to become corrupt, right? And rule over the working class, okay? On the other hand, if class consciousness is high, okay, if socialism is high, then the divide and conquer strategies are not prevalent. And the working class claims the true value of their labor, okay? And they do that through unions, right? Through strikes, labor strikes. And they avoid the exploitation of labor that occurs when class consciousness is low. So, in a sense, class consciousness is actually all that matters. It doesn't matter whether you have a communistic or capitalistic economy. All that matters is that class consciousness remains high, so that you're not enabling the people who actually control the resources to control them. If class consciousness is high, again, those labor strikes and those unions, they take the true value of their labor and avoid the exploitation. Okay, so I would actually argue, though, that capitalism is better than communism for one reason, okay? And it's basically that capitalism provides one extra line of defense between the corruption of the government, okay? In the capitalistic model, the government must collude with the owners, okay? Whereas in the communistic model, the owners are already the government, right? The capitalistic model allows the working class the opportunity to make laws that keep the owners from colluding with the government. So when I said that capitalism doesn't determine how profits are distributed, what I meant was that the magnitude of class consciousness, okay, the magnitude of socialism or the magnitude of collectivism, that is what determines how profits are distributed, okay? If we are all in unions and we all start labor strikes the moment we are being treated unfairly, then the owners have to concede to us, right? I mean, you can absolutely have fair wages in a capitalistic economy. All you need is high class consciousness. All you need is a high magnitude of socialism, right? So this again, as I said, it comes through unions and labor strikes, right? And as we've seen recently with UPS and the United Auto Workers, right? They're starting these strikes and these unions that are demanding fair pay. And what is the cause of we have to ask an important question, okay? What is the cause of diminishing class consciousness that ultimately leads to the exploitation of labor in capitalistic or communistic economies? Okay, what is the cause of the succeeding divide and conquer strategies in the United States today? All right, well, simple answer, okay? Censorship. The First Amendment doesn't just protect free speech, okay? Free speech is much more than two words, okay? It's much more than those two words might insinuate. A little mosquito on the camera. It's free speech is much more than those two words insinuate. Again, okay? Our speech is communication itself, okay? Everything we learn and teach is delivered through the words that we say, that we read, and that we hear, okay? So our entire perception of reality, our entire perception of what is happening in this world, it's dependent on our communication. It's determined by our communication. Okay, so the moment you allow any entity to manipulate or censor that speech, you enable divide and conquer strategies to diminish class consciousness, and you in effect enable the exploitation of labor and the rising wealth inequality that we're seeing. Okay, so in the US today, we are manipulated again along social, cultural, racial, religious divides, okay, fake political divides. We're manipulated by the mainstream media along these fake divides, and also you could put some blame on the social media platforms too, right? They have these algorithms that only show the most divisive stuff to us because that's the stuff we click on, that's the stuff we watch, and therefore that's the stuff that brings in the social media platforms their ad revenue. Okay, all of these large social media platforms, they run on ad revenue. They depend on it. It is their business model. So their algorithms, right, their machine learning algorithms, they push the controversial content. They push these fake divides, again, these social, cultural, racial, and religious divides. So all that the ruling class has to do is fill our perception with these fake divides and these distractions, and you spend that much less time focusing on the class divide, on the class war. Okay, so before the internet, TV, and radio, the middle class was empowered, right? Like after World War II, we had families living on one income. And then what happened was, again, TV and radio took off. They divided us amongst each other, and they took all the profits for themselves, okay? The ruling class didn't have a monopoly on public perception until TV, radio, and especially the internet took off, okay? Because the ruling class didn't control our communication, because we were speaking directly to each other instead of through these filtered media and social media platforms, okay? So the solution is simple, okay? We have to demand First Amendment protections on social media platforms, okay? And we have to stop watching mainstream media. It's really simple. We just have to stop being manipulated by the technology we've invented, okay? The public square has moved to our new technology, right? And we didn't quite grasp the implications of this, okay? In other words, we are using our technology like kids in a candy store. We have no idea how to use this technology responsibly. And it's literally driving us insane. It's driving the division between, again, all of those fake divides, and it's hiding that class divide from us, okay? So ask a couple questions, okay? Do you think black crime would be so high without the racial wealth disparity? No, of course not. But the ruling class hides that class war and divides us along racial lines, all right? What else? Okay, so how about this? Do you think people would be getting so many abortions if we could afford children? No, of course not. But again, the media divides us along these religious divides, and we blame the other side of the divide rather than the class war. Do you think people would perceive the trans community as a threat if the mainstream media didn't tell us they were grooming children? No, okay, but again, the mainstream media lies to us about these cultural issues to distract us from the class war. Okay, and I could also ask you, do you think our health would be so poor in this country if we weren't being advertised this highly palatable processed food 24/7? Again, the answer is no. But our poor health feeds the profits of the food industry, and then by extension the pharmaceutical industry, the healthcare industry, and you could even say the self-medication industry, like, alcohol and the drug industry, right? And we could go as far to say the funeral industry, right? Our poor health feeds the profits of all of these industries. Okay, I mean, do you think there would be so many anti-vax people if these people didn't have a plethora of legitimate reasons to not trust the government and big pharma? Okay, no. The answer is no. The reason people are anti-vax is because they've been swept under the rug by their government and by the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry. Okay, we have to understand what these profits are doing to our society, and then you have companies like BlackRock and Vanguard that purchase stock in every large company, and in effect they kind of create a monopoly. Now, it's not a true monopoly, but it's an effective monopoly that drives the profits that are destroying us, right? These companies purchase 8% of every large company in the world, and they puppeteer them to their will. Okay, and worse even than that is that our 401ks, our retirement strategies, literally invest in these large companies. Okay, in other words, our retirement strategies are built to feed the divide and conquer strategies that are destroying us. It's time to forgive your fellow working class citizens for their differences and unite with them. Okay, it's time to raise class consciousness. Every problem we have stems from this resource scarcity that comes from a lack of class consciousness, okay? This wealth inequality. Scarcity causes fear. Fear justifies greed, and the greed creates more scarcity. It's circular logic, okay? And it creates a vicious cycle that only ends when the working class unites across these fake political lines, okay? The two major parties in this country, if you haven't noticed yet, their economic policies are not that different from each other. The only thing they differ on are these racial, cultural, social, and religious divides. And it's the economy that is causing all of those divides to fester, okay? There may have been a time in the past when resource scarcity was a natural occurrence, okay? And the fact of the matter is that our technology it's enabled abundance, okay? Our resource scarcity today is manufactured. It's manufactured by the ruling class, okay? And I mean, 40% of the country is obese, right? I mean, food certainly isn't scarce, right? What is scarce is micronutrients that allow our brains to escape this fight or flight mode and actually think for ourselves and not let the mainstream media do the thinking for us, okay? Like, I mean, the most scarce resource of all, though, is class consciousness, okay? That's where it all starts. We need to raise class consciousness, but instead we're too busy watching sports, movies, TV shows, mainstream media even, and all the ads that come with it, and then we feed the vicious cycle that is destroying our society, okay? So, if you eat the food they sell you, and you invest in the companies that are destroying every facet of your life, and then you point the finger at your manufactured opposition, what do you think you're going to get? You're going to get more of the same, okay? There is no path to success through any politician that is being supported by any public mainstream media platform. There's no path to success through the establishment Democrat and Republican candidates. There isn't, okay? If you are stuck in this most recent Democrat versus Republican paradigm being pushed on CNN and Fox News, you are part of the problem, okay? And right now that's currently Trump versus Biden, right? But it changes, and it may change before the next election, okay? You have to vote outside of the mainstream media's paradigm. We have to begin to build the perception that a third party or non-establishment candidate can win, okay? And we have to begin building that perception as soon as possible, okay? It may require a couple losses. It may require us to hand the election to the greater of two evils for a couple election cycles. But the thing is if you perpetually vote for the lesser of two evils, what do you think the result is? The result is evil, okay? There's a quote, I think Einstein said it maybe, it says that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, okay? You have to walk the walk here. You have to start doing something different if you want different results. So start voting for that third party. Start voting for, make your protest vote seen if you're an unlikely voter. It doesn't matter if you hand the election over to Trump or Biden, or whoever you think is more evil. We need to get out of this paradigm, and we do that by building that third party voting percentage over the course of a couple election cycles, and before long we will actually elect somebody that is representing our interests. Okay, so get yourself healthy. Okay, get out of this fear-driven fight or flight mode. Get out of the paradigm, and we will collectively solve our problems. We have to work together. We cannot keep getting divided along these fake divides. Okay, if you don't know what a divide and conquer strategy is, you need to research it. You need to understand how the ruling class is ruling us and how they are conquering us in the process. Okay, if you vote based on minimizing the evil in this election cycle, and you end up voting for at the lesser of two evils, again, the end result is evil. That is how logic works in this case. Okay, so please get out of the paradigm. Again, this begins by getting yourself healthy. Start eating healthy. Start getting the micronutrients that you need, your body needs. Okay, and I talk about diet a lot because it truly is important. If you're not eating healthy, your brain isn't working right. If you're eating processed foods and you can't stop eating processed foods, it's because you're not getting micronutrients and your body's never shutting off the hunger signals. And then you eat more processed food and you still don't get the micronutrients, and then your brain, again, it falls into these fight or flight cycles. And this is and then you listen to the mainstream media, you listen to who they tell you to fear, and you fight them. You fight your fake opposition. It's always been a class war. Thanks for watching.